I thought I was just looking for a new home, but I ended up being kidnapped. Chapter 10. An Unexpected Encounter. Natalia SP. Oh, I yawned as I walked out of my house. My stupid internal clock had gotten me up before the sun again, so it only got 3 hours of sleep at most. I hailed a cab and told the driver to take me to a good real estate agency. I watched the city through the window. It never seemed to rest. Even now, there was quite a bit of traffic and the sun hadn't even grazed the horizon yet. The cab dropped me off at a place called Palace Homes. I walked into the lobby and to the front desk. Good morning. Welcome to Palace Homes. What can I do for you? The brunette behind the desk eyed me up and down, sizing me up and probably making judgments that were most likely wrong. Can you get one of your agents to show me some houses? Sure. Just write down your requirements and we'll narrow it down. She handed me a paper and pen, then went back texting. Can we please get a walk-in closet? Candy pleaded before I even put the pen to the paper. I chuckled in my head. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeline Nilben, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. After a few minutes of contemplation, I'd written at least 3 bedrooms, the bathrooms, a walk-in closet, a balcony, a big kitchen, a jacuzzi, a study, a chandelier in the dining room, a fireplace in the living room and an outdoor pool. The balcony, walk-in closet, jacuzzi, chandelier and pool had been Candy's idea. I just hoped she was planning on trying to get me to throw any parties. I looked over the list. This LLB expensive. AWW. Come on, Nut. You saw the numbers. This LL barely put a dent in your account. She did have a point. Fine. But you only get 3 picks on the furniture and you can only choose the paint for 1 room. Deal. I handed the paper and pen to the lady and wrote my number down. You should get a call before noon about your appointment. Have a nice day. She didn't even bother to look up from her phone. I thanked her and walked out. I took my phone out and called Hale. It was surprisingly easy to figure out. Her voice was laced with worry and tension. Hey, Ari. What's up? Hale. Is everything okay? Everything's fine. She uttered a nervous laugh. I could imagine her eyes darting from side to side while sweat droplets dotted her forehead. Why didn't she want to tell me the problem? I guess she needed her secrets. We'd only just met. Okay then. I was just calling to ask you the name of the college you're going to attend. It's called Kildrain Punctuary Al University. Is that all you need? Yeah. That's all. Are you alright? She was breathing so heavily that I was pretty sure that I would hear it without my advanced hearing. I also caught a few sobs. No. I mean yes. Yes, everything is fine. There is no need to worry. Everything is fine. She sounded more like she was trying to convince herself than trying to convince me. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeline Nilben, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. If you insist, you know you can tell me anything. Right. She made a distracted sound of agreement. Call me if you need anything. Okay. Bye, Ari. Bye. I wonder what the problem is. Candy mused. I shrugged and pocketed my phone. Whatever it is, it doesn't matter. If she trusts me enough to tell me, then we can worry, but until then, it's none of our business. You're right. I decided to see what Central Park looked like before going home to get my results. I remembered coming across it in a library book. I hailed a cab and told the driver my destination. After a full minute without movement on the driver's part, the hairs on the back of my neck stood on end. I slowly reached out to tap his shoulder with caution. Sir, is everything Al? He abruptly whipped around to face me. His glowing black eyes held mine, and I found that I cowled and moved. I wasn't even able to blink. The hairs on my neck strained against my skin. What's happening? She didn't respond. Why didn't she respond? I tried to take in his appearance, but I cowled and looked away from his eyes. All I caught sight of was the orangings, red hair that fell in his eyes. I cowled and looked away. The intensity of the glow of his eyes rose as he uttered one with sleep Candy HEL. Darkness overtook my vision, and I did just that. I slept. I woke up lying in a bed in an unfamiliar room. Judging by the room's lack of personality, I assumed I was in a hotel. "You there?" "Yeah," she sounded sleepy. My eyes landed on a pair of grey eyes slightly obstructed by familiar ginger hair. I shot out of the bed and took a defensive stance. "Impressive. Most people wouldn't be actively aware when they're under control, but I saw you panic and struggle back in the cab. You also woke up a lot earlier than most people would, and you seem to have remembered everything immediately." His drawl was lazy as he sat casually on the table across the room. "Who are you and what do you want?" I demanded. He couldn't have been from the Lightwood pack. I remembered all their faces and his worst one of them, plus he didn't smell like a werewolf. What if they de-enlisted his help in order to find me? That was highly unlikely. Only one person in the pack knew my name and did go on by Ari since I arrived in the city. They also should have been fooled by my death scene, and it was like them to persistently search for someone like me. None of the pack allies knew who I was either, and there was no one who could have told them my location. It didn't make sense, but if it was the pack, I was going without a fight. The bathroom door opened and out stepped one of the last people I expected to see, Kirsten. "Oh, you're awake. This is awkward. I was planning on practicing what to say before you woke up." I didn't feel any hostility from her as she moved closer, but I still kept my stance and followed her every move. She sat on the bed and waved the guy away with slight playfulness. "Thanks for all your help, Danny. Now, if you'd excuse us, we've got very important things to discuss." Danny shrugged and got off the table, then walked out of the room in a way that made me think he was ready to fall over asleep. Kirsten clapped her hands together once the door closed behind him. "To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Noble, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. I know we got off on the wrong foot and I don't expect us to become pals right away, but I think I can be of help to you." I blinked. "Help?" Kirsten wanted to help me. "Yes, help. You weren't the only one who was rejected on the night of that birthday party." "Rejected? How did she know it found my mate that night in the first place?" "Yes, rejected. Harry was supposed to be my mate, but he rejected me for Kylie. You have a similar situation with Callum and Brittany. It was the question. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Noble, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. I always knew that Callum would end up with Brittany and Harry with Kylie regardless of who their mates were. My presence always went unnoticed, so it heard a lot of private conversations while cleaning. We have quite a few common enemies. I don't like the pack either, and your letter to them was true." She grinned and I returned it with one of my own. I relaxed and sat next to her. "What are you suggesting?" I asked, even though I already knew the answer. "You don't like the pack?" "I don't like the pack." "You want revenge?" "I want revenge. You'll be on the outside while you'll stay on the inside and gather information that can be used to destroy our common enemy." "That sounds very appealing." She smirked back. "Can we start over? I'm really sorry for being so horrible to you for all those years. You seem like a good person." She seemed sincere, and I didn't think any of the pack members were smart enough to come up with a plan like this. If they wanted me back, they'd most likely use force. What do you think? I don't sense any signs of her lying, but even so, we should still be careful. Okay, we can start over. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Noble, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Her face broke out into a smile. "Great. First things first, Tide, I'll know your name." "That's fine. Only Callum doesn't. That's because he needed it to reject me, and I had to say it to accept the rejection. It's Avrel, but just call me Ari. I saw no use in lying about it, since in the unlikely event that the pack was behind this, Callum already knew. Kirsten SB. Oh, Ovi. That's fine. Only Callum doesn't. That's because he needed it to reject me, and I had to say it to accept the rejection. It's Avrel, but just call me Ari. Wow. Who would have guessed that she'd have had such a pretty name? And it looked like Ari had accepted her rejection and moved on with her life while I was still making goo eyes at the person who would never glance at me the way I stared at him. She was obviously a lot more than just physically strong. My train of thought came to a halt at the sound of her voice. So, Kirsten, what's the plan? I blinked in surprise. You know my name. She raised a single brow as if to say really. Oh right. You had the whole silent but always there thing. She almost seemed like a completely different person from the way she was before. Since she no longer used her now luscious chestnut hair as a curtain, I could see how beautiful she was. Her smile was radiant and it lit up her once dull eyes so they shined like emeralds. I couldn't fathom how I'd never noticed her beauty before. Callum must have been either temporarily blindfolded or in a very dark place when he decided to reject her. She cleared her throat. The plan. Oh right. This is what I've come up with. I'll stay with the pack and gather information for a few years, then 6 months before we're ready to expose them, I'll leave. I was thinking of just going to the royal family to report them. Her calculating gaze never left mine even after I was done explaining my half-cooked plan. A smirk that made her look like she pitied my idea appeared on her face. While your plan is nice, I have a more elaborate one. Oh, the look in her eyes made me grateful that it was me she was plotting against. Don't we have specific targets? Yes, I promised to destroy the pack, but that's pretty general. I promised Kylie, Brittany, Callum and Harry that I'd destroy them, but to do that, you'll need valuable information on each of them. That's where you come in. You'll need you to get closer to them and snoop around. Find delicate secrets. Things that they make a lot of effort to hide. You're already friends with each of them, so it shouldn't be a problem. While you do that, you'll take care of things on my end by gaining friends in high places and riling their enemies. We can stick with the aspect of your plan that involves you leaving some time before we strike. Her plan a lot more detailed than mine, and she'd only just come up with it. Other than Kylie, I didn't think it would be much of a problem to find dirt on them. I perked up as a thought came to mind. Why don't we make a pack? Why don't we make a pack? We said at the same time, then grinned at each other. I liked her more and more by the second. Chapter 11. New place. Old place. Natalia SP. OV. My phone vibrated in my pocket, signaling a call. I held my hand up as I answered it. Hello. Good morning. This is Kelly from Palace Homes. I'm calling to inform you that your appointment is due for noon today. It was voice of the brunette from the reception. That was fast. Thank you. I'll be there. I replied and hung up, then checked my watch. 8:40. I had time. I turned back to Kirsten. Sorry for the interruption. You were saying, what are you gonna do during the years I'll be collecting information? Isn't it obvious? I'll be in college. She didn't say anything and stared at me with surprise like it was the last thing she expected me to say. What? She shook her head. Nothing. It's just that werewolves never go to school after they graduate high school. It made sense. Werewolves usually made money from careers that didn't require a third level of education, and it was common to find alpha taxing their members for supply funds and, a surprising number of times, their pockets. I did tell Harry and Kylie that I'd make something out of myself. She smirked. I know. Your letter to Kylie was practically bleeding your hatred. I raised a brow. You read that? Of course I did. I needed to be sure that if you were alive, you'd be on board with revenge against her. Now that she mentioned it, how did she know? How did you know I was alive? She stiffened at the question. I could see the internal battle she was having through her eyes. Maybe she was consulting her wolf the way I did most of the time. I'm a gifted werewolf, she blurted suddenly, too fast for me to make out the words. Come again. She took a deep breath. I'm a gifted werewolf. If I connect enough with anything, I can see its past. I connected with the forest where you were said to have died and asked it to show me the last female werewolf who didn't shift. That's how I found out you were alive. No one knows about it cause I was going to tell my mate first, but she trailed off. I knew what she meant without having to say it. That's a useful skill, especially for our purpose. It's a good thing nobody else knows about it. You can use it on the targets and the former and current higher-ups. Why didn't I think of that? She murmured to herself. Tell me any useful information you have on the targets at the moment, since you're in their circle of friendship. She thought for a moment. Harry cheats on Kylie with human girls at school and few of the loners in the pack at least 3 times a week, and I'm not counting the rounds for each time. He even has a jar labeled booty calls full of phone numbers that he keeps in Andre's room for when Kitty's out and HES bored. I shook my head. Given his nature, that doesn't surprise me. Anything else on him? She thought for a moment. He did mention something about drug dealing during a party. He was completely wasted, so I don't think it's very accurate. Other than that, I don't know any information on him that can be useful to us. That piqued my interest. If it is true, that can prove very useful since drug dealing is also illegal in werewolf society. Look into it. What about the others? Brittany has a knot, so, secret troop of guys that she meets with at least once on a normal day. She can be gone for hours on end. Kylie has had an affair teachers for better grades and the time she was supposed to be at swimming club after school. She was actually with those teachers, 3 of which are mated werewolves. Kitty's family wants her to mate with Harry to keep the connections and lineage strong. Same thing with Harry's dad. Callum is sort of a mystery. The only times HE's been with other girls was before he was dating Brittany, and I don't know if it's his family pushing him to mate with Brittany. Everyone but him knows that Brittany is cheating on him. He should have accepted you, at least you'd be faithful. I ignored the compliment. Well, she was right. She didn't know me and had no grounds to assume anything about me. I wonder if his family is forcing him to mate with Brittany, not that it changes anything. If that's the case, then HE is a coward for not thinking for himself. Candy said. I agreed. I don't want a coward for a mate. He must be either blind or really stupid and inattentive if HE is oblivious to what Britain's doing. While what you have is great, we need something deeper to make a real impact that will go down in werewolf history. Can you do that? She nodded and perked up suddenly. I have something on the pack's methods for climbing to the top. I knew from overhearing conversations that the pack's methods for success weren't exactly legitimate. It half-heartedly fished around, but it seemed like only the previous generation higher-ups knew about it, but they stayed in a different pack house so had given up. Go on. The higher-ups go to visit some of their allies and secretly siphon money and plant seeds of distrust and hate between the members. Every pack that has been targeted have disbanded or fallen way down the ranks. This is great. Write down the list of packs that have been targeted. She grabbed a paper and pencil from the vanity table and scribbled them down and handed it to me. I scanned the writing. There were at least 3 dozen pack names. Is this all of them? She nodded. I'll need you to get evidence of the process for each of these packs and the future ones as well. Don't let anyone find you or your connection to me out. As far as you are concerned, when you're with the pack, in dead, you're gonna need to hide your findings somewhere nobody will look. I'll hide them in your old room, nobody goes there. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Noble, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. There's a loose floorboard that you can raise and put them in. It's 2 feet directly on front of the door. Document everything and put the backups there. We'll meet at this hotel every 6 months. Keep the information on a flash drive as well and bring it when we meet. Is that all right for you? She nodded again. I smiled and got up, then walked to the door. I paused before opening it and spoke without looking back at her. I hope you're not trying to trick me in any way. I could hear the nervousness in her voice. No, I would never. They hurt me too. I turned my head to the side, peering at her in my peripheral. Good. Otherwise, they won't be the only people I'll destroy. I exited the room and shut the door behind me before she could reply. After getting the address from a puzzled-looking receptionist, I strolled out and checked my watch. 3 minutes past 9. Judging from the amount of traffic at this time, it'd probably take me all of 3 hours to get to Palace Homes. I hailed a cab and told the driver to take me there. About an hour later, Candy spoke up. Net. Yes, Candy. I replied while gazing out the window. What are we gonna do about a mate? This was like her. She normally didn't care much about Callum. Where is this coming from? When Kirsten mentioned Callum, it just reminded me that we found our mate but were not mated. And remember, a werewolf that's found its mate but has been rejected, can't survive for more than 5 years without finding a compatible partner, werewolf or not. I remembered reading about it. We have 5 whole years to worry about it, plus we haven't shifted, so I'm not sure it even applies to us. I don't want to think about that now. But we need a mate, she insisted. Drop it. Our survival depends on it. Drop it. Candy, I repeated. But, I said, drop it. Candice, I do not need anyone to survive. Especially not some horny bastard that won't even love me and will end up either leaving me or letting me down. I yelled in my head, almost shouting it out loud. I didn't need to depend on anyone for my well-being. I had Candy and could always make friends. That was more than enough for me. I spent the rest of the ride in silence. I arrived at Palace Homes at 3 minutes to spare and walked in. The brunette turned to a middle-aged lady when she spotted me. Right on time. She's here. The lady extended her hand and I shook it. My name's Margaret Firen. I'm going to show you a couple of houses that match your requirements. If you'll follow me to the car. She led me out to a red car in the front lot. I got into the passenger seat as she sat in the driver's seat and pulled out. If I may, the lady began after some minutes. Aren't you rather young to be buying a house? She glanced at me briefly and focused back on the road. I get that a lot. I'm actually 18. I lied smoothly. Oh, I'm sorry. You look barely 16. It's all right. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilban, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. She took me to 3 houses. Each one was extravagant and beautiful. Each one was in a secure area. Each one was distinct. None of them stood out to me. On our drive to the 4th and final house for the day, I remembered the college I was supposed to go to. Do you know the address of Kildrain Punctuary Our University? She glanced at me for a second. I'm pretty sure everyone knows. It's ranked among the top 5 most prestigious colleges in the world along with Harvard and Oxford. To get in, you have to either be a genius or ridiculously rich, or in the rare case, both. It's been around for close to 4 centuries now, and it has 5 different campuses in this state, but the main one is here in New York. It sounded like a really good college. This next house isn't too far from it. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilban, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. She added while pulling up into the driveway. I stepped out of the car and gasped. The front of the house was based on a Greek temple style with white pillars holding up a triangular bit that jutted out from the roof. The big French double doors revealed a wide landing that led to elegant spiral stairs. To my left was a wide living room with a huge fireplace and arch windows letting light in. The living room was connected to a mildly extravagant dining room with a chandelier in the middle of its ceiling. The window in the dining looked out onto a sizable pool and garden with a variety of color-coordinated flowers from the warmest colors to the coolest, looking like a rainbow with a lot more stripes. On the right side seemed to be a drawing room of sorts, that led out to a small ballroom with a grand piano sitting in the corner near a locked door. Mrs. Margaret led me up the stairs, showing me all 9 rooms, each with their own bathroom plus an extra one behind the stairs. The master bedroom was massive and had both a big walk-in closet, with a mirror at the end of rows upon rows of shelves and racks, and balcony that looked out onto the garden, which I could tell delighted Candy, regardless of her silence. The master bedroom's bathroom was pristine and huge with a shower, bathtub, toilet, sink, jacuzzi and mini changing room plus a door that led directly to the walk-in closet. She took me down to the kitchen, housing the study but housed enough books to be considered a library. She showed me the layout of the kitchen and the walk-in freezer and storage room. After exiting through the back door and walking down a very natural-looking stone pathway to the front of the house where the car was parked, she turned to me. So, what do you think? I know you wanted 3 bedrooms and 4 bathrooms, but this meets everything else. There is also a basement with a cellar and some extra space. It's amazing. I gushed. It meets all the requirements and exceeds them. I'll take it. She smiled. That's wonderful to hear. Let's go back to the office for you to sign some paperwork. We drove back to Palace Homes and she led me to her office. As I looked over the payment schedule, I noticed it was for rent. This payment is for complete and total ownership. Doesn't your policy say it's supposed to be for rent? And I couldn't help but notice that the house is already furnished. Not that I minded. The furniture was beautiful to me. I just needed to replace the blues with red. She nodded. Yes, it does. Our houses usually have to be rented for a year before you can choose to pay for full ownership or continue renting. That house isn't actually ours though. It was built and owned by someone else, but almost 19 years ago. The owner left us in charge of the house on the condition that only a respectful person could buy it after 18 years had passed, and that if a child wishes to buy it, we must release it for free, regardless of if it is owned at the time. What was her name? What did she look like? She thought for a moment. Elena. She was a beautiful lady with green eyes that reminded me of the sea, and black hair with blonde around the roots. Now that I think about it, you look almost exactly like her. If I didn't know any better, it'd say she was your. She trailed off, staring intently at me, Mom. I whispered. Chapter 12 Heartwarming Gift Natalia SP. Oh, this Elena. I whispered. My last name. You're her daughter. Mrs. Margaret said it like a statement. I knew there was something familiar about you. You have the same face and you carry yourself the same way. You probably got your father's eyes. No, I didn't get either of their eyes. Hatred filled me at the thought of the spurned owner, and I forced a smile. Probably. Aquine said that I have to ask you 3 questions to be sure of your relation to her. She unlocked a drawer and pulled a paper out. I nodded. Go ahead. Did you know her last name before the past 3 years? No. She checked the paper. What are the names of your step-family members? Clark Lightwood, Tiffany Helena Lightwood, Harry Theodore Lightwood, and Brittany Penelope Lightwood. What was your mother's favorite song? Explain your answer. I remembered my 5-year-old self asking my mum this same question after hearing a song on the radio for the first time. Her answer had puzzled me at the time, that I understood now. She didn't have one. She always said that every melody, lyric and song was a different expression or story. She said that to ask her favorite song was like asking a book lover their favorite novel. Each one was too unique and has a different impact to be compared to another in terms of the best. It was true. My mum had only been a music lover, but I adored music, art and reading, and from personal experience, I could say it applied to all of them. Mrs. Margaret put the paper down and smiled at me. Well, I guess that proves you're her daughter. She searched the drawer and produced a set of keys in a different sheet of paper. Here's the key. Just sign here and the house is yours. I read the paper and signed. She handed me the key. Are there any things you'd like to move to the house? Just clothes. Can you help me with them? To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilban. Heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Your mother paid for a moving branch to cater for your move. Thank you. May I have some paper and a pen? She handed them to me and I wrote my address down. This is where I live. Will it be all right if they come at 7 in the evening? No problem, she replied. Thank you. I walked out, smiling at the brunette as I passed. On the cab ride to my landlord's place, Candy spoke up. I'm sorry, Nat, I sighed. It's all right. I know you're worried about us, but we're gonna be fine. We don't need anyone, we have each other. That's more than enough. Yeah, she echoed. After a brief silence, I whispered to her, Mom lived here. She did. Candy agreed. Did you like the house? To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilban. Heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. It has everything both of us want and it's already beautifully furnished. It's like Mom knew. She always managed to know exactly what I like. What was she like? Candy asked. I relished the memory of my mother's love. She was the gentlest creature I've ever known. She always did everything in her power to make sure I was happy, even if it was at the expense of her comfort. She was stunning on both the inside and out. I couldn't have asked for a better mother. She sounds wonderful. Candy commented. She was. In every way possible. I miss her. We pulled up at the landlord's place. I asked the driver to wait and knocked on the door. After a lot of scrambling and muttering, Mr. Parkinson opened the door. What can I do for you? Ariel. I came to notify you of the termination of my rent. When are you moving out? Tonight. He looked shocked. That's a very short notification. It was a spontaneous decision. You paid for the month, so I have to refund the money for the time you won't spend in the house. You've only been there for 4 days. Let me get my calculator so that I can. That won't be necessary. You can keep the money. I should be able to get the keys to you tomorrow. His eyes widened. Are you sure you don't want a refund? I can work something out for you. I shook my head and smiled. Keep the money. I'll see you tomorrow. I turned and walked back to the cab. I got home an hour before the movers were due to arrive. I hadn't unpacked any of the clothes I'd bought, so I packed my things from the pack into my duffel and put everything in the living room. Once I set the last box of shoes down, I locked my house up and walked across the street to Trevor's place. I knocked and waited. An old lady opened a door. Hello, Ariel. This is a pleasant surprise. What can I do for you? Good evening, Mrs. Jaren. Oh my. Is Trevor home? She shook her head. No dear. He should be back soon though. Would you like to come in and wait for him? I just finished baking some cookies and I'd love it if you tried some. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Lilben. Heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. She stepped aside and led me into the house after closing the door. The place was decorated with warm colors and had a homey feel. She took me to the kitchen and sat at the island, motioning for me to take one of the other 2 seats. I sat opposite her. She took a cookie from the bowl between us. Go on. Try one. I picked one up from the bowl and peered at it. I'd never tasted cookies before. Even though I made them dozens of times for the pack, I hadn't been allowed to eat or drink anything sweet. I wasn't even supposed to eat more than 3 times a week, and I only took fruits because I knew they wouldn't notice. I bit into it and smiled. Now I knew why the pack kids loved them so much. They were delicious. Do you like it? She asked with a grin. I do. It's the best I've ever tasted. The first I've ever tasted. That's good to hear. How do you like New York so far? It's such a lively place. Trevor and Greg have been so helpful. They took me shopping along with 2 of their friends yesterday. She grinned mischievously. I know. Trevor can't stop talking about you. He told me all about how you stood up to that mean girl he spends time with. He rather likes you. I think my other grandson might be equally fond of you too. I felt my face heat up. Ah, really? Her grin widened. Oh, yes. They were both so happy this morning, and they actually acknowledged each other without any mutual friends around for the first time in 2 years. I even heard them having a conversation in the living room while I was in the kitchen. I recall hearing your name a few times. I'm glad they're getting along. So am I. You seem to have worked wonders for them. You don't know how happy I was to see them smile together within these walls. I'm happy to hear that. She nodded and suddenly turned serious. While I'm delighted with what you've done for them, I won't tolerate you playing around with my boys' hearts. I shook my head vigorously. I wouldn't dream of it. They're both good friends of mine, and I would never intentionally do anything to hurt them. I'm not ready for a relationship right now anyway. That's a shame. I think you'd be good WI. The front door opened with a bang. Trevor and Greg's voices wafted to the kitchen in unison. Graham. We're home. They walked into the kitchen and stopped when they saw me. Hi, Ari. What brings you here? Said Trevor. Hi, Trev. Hi, Greg. I actually came here to tell you guys that I'm moving. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Lilben. Heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. They yelled in harmony. As if on cue, I heard a horn and looked out the window to see the moving truck. Today, the brothers and their grandmother looked in my line of sight. Oh my. Trevor. Gregory. Why don't you two go and help Ariel with her things? Okay. Gran. They synchronized and led of their house into mine. I unlocked the door and beckoned the movers inside. In a flurry of movement, the brothers and the movers got my clothes and duffed it into the truck. What should we do with the furniture? To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilben, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. We've been told that the house you bought is already furnished. One of the movers with the southern one asked, "You guys can take what you need and donate the rest to an orphanage." "Are you sure?" Another mover asked, analyzing my sofa. "They all look brand new. I'm sure you could refund them." "I'll just take the vase of tiger lilies." "That's mighty kind of you," the first one commented. "What about your clothes? If we put the furniture in the truck, it'll be a hassle getting them out," said Greg. Trevor shrugged. "We could always move them to the car." To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilben, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Greg got the car out and the movers carried everything to the truck once we got my stuff out. When we were done, the first mover clapped his hands together. "Well, that's everything. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilben, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. None of your things are in the tuck, so should we just go back?" "Yes, thanks for your help. It's no problem." To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilben, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. He said and got into his truck with his colleagues, then drove away. "Well, take you to your new place." To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilben, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. We got into the car and Greg drove while I rode in the passenger seat and directed him. "Why the move?" Trevor asked when we were halfway there. "Last night, I realized the house was a bit too small, so I decided to move into something a bit bigger. I went house hunting today. I guess it was pretty tiny." Greg mused. I heard some ruffling from the back. Trevor handed me a frame with a picture of us at mall the previous day. Our grins were wide as we huddled together while Keely took the photo. I smiled as I stared at it. "We were gonna give it to you tomorrow, but we think it'll be a nice housewarming gift," Greg explained. I was speechless as I hugged the frame to my chest. "Do you like it?" Trevor asked in a small voice. "I love it. Thank you so much." I couldn't speak any louder than a whisper, lest my voice fail me. Having people be this nice was new to me. "It's no problem. It was all my idea," they said at the same time. I laughed as they briefly glared at each other through the rearview mirror. They bickered over whose idea the heart-warming gift was while I laughed and directed Greg. In telling you it was Trevor stopped short as my new home came into view. They both whistled at the same time and stared at the house. We got out once Greg parked the car. "I thought you said it was a bit bigger." Greg muttered, opened the trunk. I laughed as we picked the bags up and carried them to the house. I unlocked the door and walked upstairs to my room as they slowly followed behind. We got all the bags into my closet after 3 rounds. "Would you guys like a tour?" They nodded. I took them around the house, then to the backyard. "We are so coming to visit," Greg said as he stared at the pool. Once the tour was over, I accompanied them back to their car. "Would it be okay if you could come take me to Kildare College tomorrow?" I asked as they got into their car. "It's no problem. We'll be here by noon," said Trevor. "And thanks again for the gift." "It's no biggie. See you tomorrow, Ari," they said together. I waved as they drove off and walked inside once they were out of sight. I got ready for bed. Once I was done, I checked the time, 10:33. I climbed into bed, sleeping in this very room, on this very bed, and smiled. We've accomplished a lot today. Candy we have. Greg and Trev are such great friends. My smile widened. I stared at the picture on my bedside table through the dark. We forgot to eat again. Candy reminded me. "Well, unpack first, then we can eat before they come to pick us up." To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilben, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Good night. At night, I drifted off to sleep with thoughts of my mother in my head. Chapter 13 Burning Memories Natalia SP. Oh, I woke up to a sunless sky with a fading moon. The ever-present heartbeat of the city cowled and seemed to reach my home. I sat up and stretched. Good morning. That morning, I grinned. That was the best night's sleep I've ever had in my life. That's good to hear. I got out of bed and stretched, humming the melody of a song I'd heard from a passing car yesterday. I walked to my duffel and changed out of my pajamas and into my workout clothes. After my morning workout routine, I took a nearly scalding hot shower and got into some of my sweats in my duffel. I walked into my closet and got to work with sorting my clothes. For 2 hours, I got busy with arranging everything according to category, then by color. The time whizzed by as I worked, and before I realized it, I was done. Everything looked great even though they didn't fill up to half of the closet space. I changed into a new pair of blue jeans and a white shirt. The sun had graced the sky with its presence when I walked out. I grabbed my duffel and everything that had been in it on my way to the living room. I spilled all its contents on the floor in front of the fireplace and took my hair dye, spear-colored contacts, gloves and boots that I'd gotten from my mother, my important papers and wallet, then put them on one of the blue couches. Using a match I discovered in the kitchen, I got a fire started in the fireplace. Kneeling in front of it, I stared at the hypnotic dance of the flames that seemed to have me transfixed. I grabbed the first piece of clothing my hand landed on and tossed it into the fire's waiting jaws. I smiled as the material became one with its destroyer. This time, I actually looked at the next thing my hand grasped. It was a baggy yellow shirt, splattered with now dry blood and holes. I loathed it and the memories it brought. I cowered in terror as the man that was my biological father stalked towards me with intentions that no real dad should ever come close to having. Please, I whimpered as I shrank back. I didn't know. I swear I had no idea. Alpha, shut up. You stupid waste of space. Do not speak. You are a mistake. A mistake. You hear. You knew. You knew not to talk to anyone who wasn't in the pack about anything. And yet you did. When I'm done with you, you will never disobey me. You use this excuse for a werewolf now. No, please. Sorry. I pleaded as he raised me up by my hair. My rather small 13-year-old framed angled from his grasp as I clutched his arm to take some of the strain off my screaming scalp. Stop scratching me, you bitch. He raged as he shook me violently. He pulled his arm back and flung me across the space to the other side of the school corridor we were in. My head crashed against the wall, followed by the rest of my body, before I fell limply to the floor. My head throbbed as my vision threatened to darken. My whole body felt like I'd being run over by a Mack truck before the vehicle reversed, then ran me over another time. Just for good measure. Surely, all my bones were broken. I couldn't move a muscle as I heard him leisurely walk towards me, as if taking a stroll. I forced myself to remain conscious out of fear of what he would to me while I was mentally present. You've been a bad girl, he teased in a contemptuous tone. Your mother was a bad girl too. My eyes narrowed as his mention of my mother. She was a filthy whore, just like you. The fear and pain that had consumed me were shoved aside by a deep, furious rage at his words. I would not listen to him degrade and insult my mother in a fetal state. I slowly forced my body to stand despite the pulsing pain. I was almost upright when I felt meaty fists collide sharply with my back. I collapsed face first back to the floor. You're a very bad girl indeed. I'm going to have to teach you a lesson, just like I taught your mother. A rip sounded through the air, followed by a zip. I felt the air against the bare skin of my bottom, having realized what he intended to do. With every ounce of energy I had left, I did my best to get away to no avail. I screamed as he pulled me close to him by my feet, desperately clawing at the floor to find purchase. A door opened. Natalia, let go of her, came the voice of my beloved physics teacher, Miss Gina Charles. Clark let go of me and turned to her. I instantly knew what he was thinking. Run. I warned, but was too late. Time seemed to slow down. In 3 short seconds, he was in front of her. I saw her eyes widen as she realized what he meant to do. No, I cried as he snapped her neck in one swift motion. Her body dropped to the polished floor with a resounding thud. Clark simply kicked her and walked out of the school without another word. With him, HED seemed to take the color from the world. It cried next to her body for hours, my baggy yellow shirt soaking up my tears. If only I hadn't opened up to her about the pack. If only I hadn't confessed to her about how horribly they treated me. If only I hadn't screamed. Then maybe the only person who cared about me other than my mother would be alive. It sworn to make him rue the day I'd been born, as it shed my last tear that day. I'd been the first time I'd cried since I was 6, when my mother had disappeared. As it used the soaked shirt to wipe my eyes, it also vowed never to shed another emotion-induced tear again. I continued to stare at the shirt that held the one of my most tortuous memories as I remembered the third promise it made to myself that day, that I'd get strong enough to protect those who I cared about from every one of my demons. I forced myself not to feed the shirt to the fire and instead decided to keep it as a reminder of the promises it made. I kept it aside, then continued to toss more reminders of that damned pack into the crackling flames. I hadn't owned many clothes there, so the burning session didn't take as long as I'd have liked it to. I knelt there for some time, watching the fire dance over the ashes of what used to be my old clothes before I stood up and dusted my jeans off. I checked my watch, 10 minutes past 9. I gathered the rest of my things back into my duffel. No, I hadn't burnt it. My mother had given it to me after all and took them back to my room. Can we go get some food now? Candy asked as I descended the stairs. Sure. I grabbed my wallet and exited the house, locking it behind me and pocketing the keys. I sped out of my property, navigating my way to a grocery store I'd seen on the way to one of the houses Mrs. Margaret had shown me by memory. I stopped in an alleyway next to the store and walked towards the entrance and through the automatic doors. Snagging a trolley, I made my way through the area of the store, grabbing promising-looking ingredients for the tasty dishes I'd prepare for myself instead of a pack of hungry, ungrateful werewolves. I selected a few treats to sate my long-deprived sweet tooth and some fruits to balance it out. After checking my purchases out, I carried them all out, desperately hoping that the grocery bags didn't tear. I ran home at a slightly slower pace to prevent them from being torn by the air resistance. I was trying to wrestle my keys out of my pocket without dropping any bags, lest I crack the eggs, when I heard the sound of a car pulling up behind me. I peered over my shoulder to see Trevor and Greg rushing out of their car to help me with my bags. You guys are early. It's not noon yet. We came 'cause we wanted to make sure you did get ready early enough. We tried calling you, but it went to voicemail. You did some serious shopping, didn't you? Greg asked rhetorically as he and his brother took most of the bags from me. Thanks, I said as I fished my keys out of my pocket and unlocked the door. I don't think you'll ever get used to your house, Trevor said as I led them to the kitchen. I simply shrugged and got to work with putting the food away with the boys' help. We talked and laughed as we worked till we were done. I can picture Kitty doing that. I actually feel sorry for the poor guy, being forced to experience something so traumatizing. I laughed as we made our way out of the kitchen. You should have seen his face. He looked ready to cry, puke and pass out at the same time. Greg added, and I burst out laughing all over again from picturing the guy's terrified green face as he scrambled to get away from a drunk Keely. Where was Haley? I asked through my mirth. She was too busy trying to comfort the last guy Keely had danced with while drunk. Trevor replied, Hey guys, we'd better get going. It's 3 minutes to noon. Greg reminded us as he checked a clock in the living room. Trevor stopped in front of the fading embers in the fireplace. Why did you light a fire? Just wanted to test it. Feigning nonchalance, I went upstairs to get my bag of school reports before joining the boys outside. I made sure to lock up and take the key as we left the house. Trevor, driving this time, thought to choose the radio station. A song that resembled screeching ravens blasted through the speakers. I reached forward and turned the volume down, enticing a groan from Trevor and a snicker from Greg. What's the school like? I asked Greg. It's pretty cool and super ancient. It was built in the 1600s, around the time there was a major belief in vampires up in Britain. The building itself looks like a Gothic castle with its dark lighting even in the summer, and its huge arches and doors. It's even got towers like the one my puzzle was locked up in. It sounds interesting, I mused. 2 hours later, the college came into view. It was just like what Greg said, only 5 times more. The whole thing looked like a dark castle straight from the medieval ages of Britain. The structure was huge and looming. Towers poked out of it at seemingly random areas. There were very few windows visible. For some reason, dark clouds hung only over the premises of the college, and I caught sight of what looked like bats circling the towers. Needless to say, the whole place sent a shiver of unease down my spine. As we drove past the gates and into the courtyard, the sun seemed to wink out of existence as we were shrouded in the thick atmosphere of the air just before it's about to rain. Bats screeched as we stepped out of the car. Welcome to Kildrain Punctual College, or better known as the Haunted Fortress. Chapter 14. To enroll and lose control Natalia SB. Oh, the Haunted Fortress? I asked as I scrunched my nose. The dreadful screeching of those bats were grating on my sensitive eardrums more than they should have. Yeah, there's a story behind the name, but that's a one for the bonfire when school starts, Trevor explained as he shut his door. I flinched as the sound reached my ears. I knew he hadn't slammed it, but it sounded like HED all but forcefully hit it with a sledgehammer. Come on, pick up the pace, Greg yelled from up ahead. I screwed my eyes shut to keep the sound from rattling my brain, but it only served to heighten my sense of hearing as my sight was cut off. I opened my eyes and started towards the looming castle, focusing only on getting inside where the screeching of the bats would be dulled. The distance seemed to stretch as I all but ran to the door. Beads of sweat dotted my temples and some casually strolled down my forehead. I grasped the handle and opened the door, stumbling inside and supporting myself with my knees. Whoa, what was that? I suppressed the urge to jump as Greg's voice snuck up from behind me. What was what? I half-heartedly feigned cluelessness. He looked incredulous. Your speed. You were almost a blow back in the courtyard. I used to be on the track team. I lied smoothly upon regaining my composure. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Noble, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. You forgot your bag, Trevor said as he handed said item to me. What was the rush? He inquired. Just excited. Plus, the bat screeched me out. Half-truth. Greg laughed. Well, I hope they don't creep you out too much, 'cause they pretty much live here every second of the year. We walked across the expensive-looking reception to the front desk where a young man sat. He wore a bored expression that told hours of nothing to do. What can I do for you? He asked curtly without looking up. I'm here for an admission application. He pointed down the hall on the right and went back to visually scorning the world. Following his directions, we went down the wide hallway and knocked on the door labeled admission. Come in. A voice that should have been muffled by the door instructed. Turning the handle, we opened the door and stepped in. Closing it behind us, a stern-looking woman with the beauty and commanding aura of a queen stared at us. Gregory and Trevor Jet and no my. Unless you are here to drop out, please excuse us. The brothers quickly shuffled out of the room at her command. She motioned to the chair in front of her desk. Have a seat, I said. I presume you are here for admission. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Noble, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. She trailed off in question. Ariel. Miss Ariel, our requirements include previous transcripts, results of notable exams. We do not accept anything less than the best. In the event that you gain admission into our school, your starting date will be on the 11th of January, she stated. If you don't mind, I would like to start in September. Her perfectly shaped white brow twitched in what I assumed was annoyance. It was hard to tell with her stoic expression. You do realize that you are 4 months late for that to be possible? She asked evenly. I realize that, but I sincerely hope you will reconsider, I said as I reached into my bag and pulled all my papers out, placing them on her desk. Grimly, she flipped through each one, her eyes lightening fast on the words, yet I knew she managed to catch every minuscule detail. Slowly, the stony expression in her eyes cracked to reveal disbelief. When she was done, she closed the file softly and gently placed it on the desk, as if it were a piece of china. Shaking her head, she sighed and muttered, "I'd be ashamed to let such a promising student go." Raising her gaze to mine, she conceded as she passed a form to me. "Maybe we can reconsider." I got in. I declared like a victorious warrior as I emerged from the room. I had no doubt. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilben, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing enthusiasm. They chimed as they congratulated me. "It's a bummer that you have to wait till January to start," Greg commented. I withheld my smile. "Yeah, Donna. So, who's willing to give me a tour?" Trevor chuckled. "Come on, let's go celebrate. You've got till next year for a tour." "Okay," I said, then added, "Race you to the car." To cover up the mad dash I'd make towards the car to avoid the worst of the bat screeches. Grasping the door handle, I braced myself and pulled it open, then raced outside. The instant incessant noise almost made me lose my tightly controlled grip on my speed. Gritting my teeth, I forged on, trying my best to block the sound out and maintain a reasonably human-leveled speed. Maybe I could go a little faster than I unbolt. "Please do," Candy whimpered, in just as much pain as I. I sped up, finally reaching the car. I tried and failed to open the door. It locked. The screeching that had been manageable till now became unbearable. Covering my ears, I crouched down with my back against the car. I squeezed my eyes shut but, again, instantly regretted it and they flew open. Candious whimpers turned to howls but I refused to utter a sound. Lest Trevor and Greg hear me, and opted to grit my teeth instead. What's taking them so long? The courtyard isn't that big. A hand touched my shoulder, and I followed it to the bearer's face. Trevor snatched his hand off my shoulder as he met my eyes. "To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilben, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing enthusiasm." "Are you okay?" Greg unlocked the car and I didn't bother to answer as I hurried into the back seat, panting like he'd run 1,000,000 miles and more. The screeching returned briefly as Greg and Trevor opened their doors, then left as they closed them. Trevor turned back to me. "What was that?" "What was what?" "Seriously, you practically bolted back to the car. You were cowering next to the car, and your eyes were glowing. It was a race. I didn't want to lose, and I hate bats. I told you that." I deflected. "You were a blur," he countered. "And what about your eyes?" "It was probably the light." He gave me a skeptical look and shook his head. Turning back to the front, I let out a silent breath of relief. Greg drove us back to my house without uttering a sound. The awkward silence was suffocating. I hated lying to them, especially since they were great friends, but I couldn't tell them the truth because then they might not accept me. Greg pulled up at my house and unlocked the doors. "You sure you're okay?" he asked before I left the car. I smiled and nodded. "Nothing to worry about. I'll see you guys soon. Bye-bye." They chorused and drove off as I closed the door. Unlocking my door and entering my home, locking it behind me. "What was that all about?" Candy asked. I tossed my keys onto its hook and started up the stairs. "I have no idea. It's only happened once before, when I couldn't control my hearing. Well, we're able to block sounds out again," I replied, flopping onto my bed. "I hate lying to them." "I know. I hate it too. But we can't let anyone know," she reminded me. Yeah, I know. We have to keep the secret and not risk further exposure so that the pack doesn't find us." Candy strayed silent. I laid there, staring at the ceiling as the house encompassed me, wrapping me in the scent of my mother. I wonder what she would have thought about all this. Candy asked. Reading my mind, she would have said, "Do what you feel you have to do, but remember to consider the feelings of others. Nobody likes an inconsiderate person." Then she would have kissed my head. "We're not being very considerate to your friends," she commented quietly. I didn't reply, contemplating the events of the day. It'd been careless, thinking I could outrun the screech of the bats and still not let anyone find out about how different I am from them. But it was strange though. It never lost control like that after mastering my hearing at 9. I was sure I'd be able to attend Kildrain if this kept up. Choosing to think about it another time, I rolled onto my stomach. Candy. I'm hungry, so what am I supposed to do about it? I can't take control of you, and even if I could, I don't know how to cook. Go make your own food if you're really hungry. That's why you went grocery shopping today. You're no help. I often got off my bed to make food for myself.